Kentucky Derby 2025. It is Kentucky Derby week, the most exciting 2 minutes in sports. And today we have the release of the 2025 Kentucky Derby Prospectus. This is our master spreadsheet of all of our Derby data for new people to horse racing and learning how to handicap the Kentucky Derby. Getting some of the data out there so you can do some of your own handicapping and just enjoy the race on Saturday. If you're on the email list, I did send out a link to the Derby Prospectus this morning, and it is available in the description of this video. And I'm going to show you how to use this for some different people that are new to the game. This is the homepage for the Kentucky Derby Prospectus. And what it starts with is we have our 6 videos that I did on handicapping the 2025 Kentucky Derby. We had the final fractions video, the speed figure analysis and progression, GPS data, and then we had exploring the 2025 dosage theory, and then top speed figures, and then some pace analysis videos. So those were the videos that we did on the way to the Kentucky Derby. If you haven't watched those, you can watch those. But this is the master spreadsheet with all of the information. And it starts off with a home page. And we'll start off at the bottom with all the different tabs. The first one is the data dictionary, which shows all of the different categories and what the category means and why it's important and why it's included in the Kentucky Derby Prospectus. So we've got 3 main pages. We've got the 2025 runners, the pedigree page, and the speed figure page. And then we go on to the final fraction, speed figure progression, the John White strike system, and other pages. But the data dictionary has the data for the 3 main pages. And if you ever want to go back to the home page, you can just click on the home button and click on home, and that brings you back to the home page. Now, every single page has a home page in the spreadsheet. So if you're here, you can go back to the home page, and then you can choose another tab in the Kentucky Derby Prospectus. So the first page is the 2025 runners page. If you click on that, this has all of the runners. And basically how I set this up is if it's red or a light shade of red, that means it's a little bit of a negative indicator. And if it's a green shade, it's more of a positive indicator. And from this sheet, we have the 20 horses plus by Asa, and he's listed as 21. And the reason why Citizen Bull is got a red for post position 1 is because post position 1 is been a very unproductive post in terms of coming in the top 4. And a lot of horses have had bad trips out of the year in post position number 1. And then post position 17 is in red because it's 0 for 45. Post position 17 has never won, and Sandman is in that post position this year. And if you're new to handicapping the Kentucky Derby, these are things that you may not know, or as you're kind of finalizing your bets, these are things kind of just to rethink about your tickets before you start including horses. And as I kind of mentioned, you can't really bet all of the horses. So you're trying to factor in what are the odds, what are some things that I like, what are some things that I don't know about. Then we have the last winner from each post position. We have the morning line. Then I have the trainer. Then we have the trainer Derby stats only. So Bob Baffert has ran 34 horses in the Kentucky Derby, 6 Kentucky Derby wins. Brad Cox has had 11 horses in the Kentucky Derby with 1 Kentucky Derby win. And then I have the jockey, and then the Jockey Derby starts and the jockey wins. If I put the jockey in green, that means they've won the Kentucky Derby. Now, I'm going with the official Derby charts, which means Flavian Prat got put up by disqualification, and he didn't actually cross the finish line first, but officially he is a Kentucky Derby winning jockey, according to Churchill Downs. And then we have the equipment change. The equipment change is anything like blinkers on, blinkers off. On Saturday, when they go through the post parade, I will be updating this sheet if anybody's wearing front wraps. That's a very negative sign. If I hear about any nasal strips, I'll be putting that on there as well. But again, this is more for people that have never handicapped the Kentucky Derby and want to have a little bit more data, know more about these horses on Kentucky Derby Day. Then we have queer and speed points. If they've got 8 speed points, I highlighted it. Citizen Bull is a horse with 8 speed points. That means he's got a high chance of taking the lead. Did they run on the Churchill Downs dirt? I put a yes if they ran on the dirt. That's been a positive signal over the years. There's been some nice prices with horses that have ran on the dirt. And I did do a freeze column on this, so you can kind of scroll to the right and still keep the name of the horse. And then I've got the running style, and then John White strikes. Remember, anything 0, 1, or 2 is a good sign for strikes. And then if they're a final fractions double qualifier, I've got a yes. And then the final prep. And the reason why the final prep is there is there's some prep races that are notoriously not very productive. So it's been since 2000, since a Wood Memorial winner has won the Kentucky Derby. So that, gives you pause on Rodriguez. It's been a long time since a Bluegrass winner has won. Got to go all the way back to Street Sense. So that gives you a little bit of pause on Burnham Square. And then, so those are the runners, and that is the spreadsheet for the 2025 data. Now, if we go to the Pedigree page, hopefully you had a chance to watch the Pedigree show with Jessica Tugwell. She was on last night. You can watch that replay. Again, same thing. I have the scroll set up so you can scroll over, but this has the sire of the horse. And one of the things that's important, horses that win at 10 furlongs on the dirt tend to sire more horses that win at 10 furlongs on the dirt. So I noted that if they won a major Big 7 race on the dirt, and the Big 7 for dirt races are the Triple Crown races, Preakness, Belmont Stakes, Kentucky Derby. Then you've got the Pacific Classic, you've got the Jockey Club Gold Cup, and you've got the Breeders' Cup Classic. Those are the big Kentucky 10 furlong prep races on the dirt. Then I've got the dam, and then if it's green, that means they won a grade 1, grade 2, or grade 3 stakes race, because that indicates a little bit more class. And then the second mare, which there's a lot of hidden stamina influences over the years. A lot of times mares that are very good racers don't produce good progeny. And it's a statistical fact that a lot of second mares get a lot of stakes winners. So I look at the second mare as more important than the first mare. And then I highlight them if they were either a good runner on the dirt or a stakes winner like Beautiful Noise. And what's interesting is Burnham Square has a mare that was a stakes winner and then a second mare that was a stakes winner. And that is why I gave him an A for an overall female family. And then Journalism has got an A because Mopatism, the mare on Journalism, was a grade 2 stakes winner. And then Luxor Cafe, she was a stakes winner. So I put an A for him. And you get down really to not a lot of horses that have really good pedigrees. Then I have the sire average winning distance, anything over 7.5, 7.5 furlongs. Remember, there's 8 furlongs in a mile, and the progeny gets a lot of holes nowadays. So you want to have a higher average winning distance from the sire side. And then the broodmare sire side is you want to have that over 7.5 as well. And then the final column is the dosage index. Remember, anything over 4 is a negative. So I put that in red. And how that works is Citizen Bull has a dosage of 9, 5 for Luxor Cafe, 7.80 for Burnham Square. So it just gives you more information when you're handicapping and planning out your exacta bets. And when you're watching the Derby coverage, you can kind of learn a little bit more information rather than just one speed figure or just go by a little bit what they're talking about. I like to have all this information kind of handy as I plan my tickets. So this is the second main page, the pedigree page. Then the third tab is the speed figure page. And what this has is some of the things that have been more influential in speed figure handicapping over the years. So again, the horse and the post position, if they're a final fractions double qualifier, that's a positive sign. 86% of Kentucky Derby winners over the last 40 years have been a double qualifier. Then I have their last three fractions and their last eighth. Remember, it really doesn't matter if they're the fastest. You really just want to have one of the 8 qualifiers. And then I listed them all just because, like, Sandman's not a qualifier. He did fit for the final eighth, but he doesn't fit for the final 3/8. So that shows you where he doesn't qualify. And then historically, any Brisnet speed figure over 100 is a positive sign coming into the Derby, because the average winning Brisnet speed figure is right around 102 for the last 13 years. And then I've got my read on the speed figure pattern. Remember, if they've paired up, that means they can improve. And then if they've topped out, that means they can probably match that up. I don't like a regress. Now, again, these are how I read it, and I'll show you the sheet on speed figure progression. That's probably the most important sheet in this entire Kentucky Derby prospectus. Now, and then it used to be significant for a lot of years to have 100 and plus buyer. For a lot of years, there was about 20 years in a row where a horse that won the Derby had 100 plus buyer, but there's just not as many horses getting 100 plus buyer. This year, we've only got 3. We've got Baeza, Journalism, and Rodriguez. So I may have to lower that threshold. I'm going to do some research for next year's prospectus on, over the years, how the number of horses with 100 plus buyers has changed. And then the next page is the final fraction double qualifiers. You can see the 8 qualifiers. This is from the final fractions video. These are all of the horses. Now, remember, Final Gambit and Flying Mohawk did it on synthetic, and that is why they have such fast final fractions, because normally on a synthetic surface, they go slow early and they go fast late. So that is why their fractions are very fast. Yes, Rodriguez is in post number 4. And overall, oh, yes, I got to change that up. So I got to put, I'll have to move that around. Thanks for noting that. So, yep, I'll write that down. As we look ahead to the final fractions double qualifiers, we've got Admire Daytona and Luxor Cafe. We did find the final fractions for Luxor Cafe. Admire Daytona doesn't qualify just because those fractions in the final time in the UAE Derby were very slow. So that is the final fractions. And again, if you want to go back to the home sheet, you just hit the home button. And then to go back to where we were at, you can go to the final fractions and click the button final fractions. And that brings you back to the final fractions page. Then we got the speed figure progression. This is probably my favorite sheet that I spend the most time on in terms of looking at the speed figures, because again, I don't always look at the fastest speed figure. I look at the day's rest and how many races they've had as a 3-year-old. And then I look at their chance to improve and get a new career top in the Kentucky Derby. So this lists every horse, then their first start, their second start, third start, fourth start, fifth, and sixth. So Citizen Bull has ran 6 times. He ran a 92 Brisnet speed figure in his debut. Then he went to a 91, so that's a pair. And then he improved to 100. Then he topped out at 107 in his last start as a 2-year-old. Then in his first start as a 3-year-old, the blue races are their races as a 3-year-old. He got a 96, and then he hit a 97. So he's paired up, and he could move forward the way I read this in the Kentucky Derby. Now, another horse like Rodriguez, he started his career with an 89, That was his only race as a 2-year-old. Then this year he's ran 4 times. He had a 97. Then he paired up a 91, and then he moved forward on a 105. So that's why a lot of handicappers like that pair, because then they can move forward. And when you go back to the speed figure sheet, that's why I put the pair there, because these are horses that could potentially move forward. So that is how I read some of the speed figures. And again, remember, this is kind of just teaching you how to look at speed figures. The only way you can get better at this is to keep on looking at it and come up with your own patterns. These are just the way I'm reading this. Somebody else could read this totally different. And Sandman is another one who paired up. Then he went forward, and then he went forward again. So I think he can run a 101 to 102. American Promise. Now, he went forward by 14 points. So it's a top. But since he improves so much, it could be a bounce factor. Now, he did have 49 days off, but I am a little bit worried about a bounce for American Promise. But maybe you're not. Maybe you're going to think the 49 days is plenty of good time and you like the workouts. Then I've got the Kentucky Derby days away. So you can see Admire Daytona. We'll go into the Derby on a 28-day turnaround. American Promise on a 49-day turnaround. Then you can look at their rest days and you can see how horses kind of cycle in to a new top and their form cycle. Now, a horse that's sitting on a good pattern is East Avenue at 100 days off, 52 days off. Now they're tightening the screws, only 25 days off. Flying Mohawk, 95 days off, 51 days off. Now only 42 days off. Sandman's ran a bunch of times, but he had a couple of nice 40-day breaks. And then that's when he hit the 43 days off, gave him a new, a 91. And then he kind of picked it up the last time when he had a little bit less days off, 34. Now, again, right around 25 to 30 days off is a good time frame for a lot of trainers. Render Judgment's turning around fast, 24 days. He had a 21-day turnaround. So whenever they've ran 5 or 6 times, what I've noticed over the years is they have less chance of improving on the Kentucky Derby. But again, that's how I read. And the only way you can get better at this is kind of just learning. Then I've got the fastest overall numbers for these horses on a Brisnet scale. And then remember, the more career races they've ran, I put them in blue because they probably won't improve as much. Like Coal Battle has 8 lifetime races. I don't think he can improve. Sandman, he got a 101. He might not improve as much, but he probably could run that 101. And then you've got Journalism with a 108. He's only ran 5 times. He could possibly improve here in the Kentucky Derby. Dave says he's enjoying the spreadsheet. Jeff says Rodriguez in post position 4. I got to update that. I remember when the foreign horse speeds were slow last year as well. Silver Charm says historically their speed figures are a little bit lower. Now, I did see that somebody posted Thorograph speed figures of 3.5 and like 4 and 2.5 for Luxor Cafe, which means he's probably not as fast as Forever Young was last year. Forever Young had faster speed figures last year. That's why everybody loved Forever Young. Now, again, he had a bad trip and he was bumped down the stretch, but he did have faster speed figures on the Thorograph scale coming in last year. And that was what was interesting. Nobody really liked T.O. Password. He only ran 2 lifetime races and he ran 5th. He actually ran a huge race on the Derby. He was wide. Yeah, Street Sense did not runner up. I said won the race, but he's actually the last horse that ran in the Bluegrass that won the Kentucky Derby. It's been a long time since we've had a winner of the Bluegrass win the Derby, but we haven't even had a horse that's ran in the Bluegrass since Street Sense win the Derby. And Street Sense ran on the synthetic surface back when the Bluegrass was synthetic. Yeah, T.O. Password was a long shot last year. So this is the speed figure progression sheet. Then I have my analysis, possible pattern. This is just how I read the sheet. Then I have the John White strike system. Again, the goal is not to have 0 strikes. The goal is to have 0, 1, or 2 strikes, but it's got about an 80% strike factor since 1973 if you have 2 or less strikes. And horses with lower amount of strikes have ran in the top 4 more often. And Sandman in Journalism was 0 strikes. Admire Daytona was 0. Baeza's got 4 if he gets into the race. So he may be a little bit underlay if he gets in. Right now, we've had no scratches, so we don't even know if he's going to get in. The Mighty Neoquos has got 2. Citizen Bull with a couple of strikes. And then the next tab at the bottom is my pace analysis. This just shows you whenever there's a fast pace, we get closers. Whenever there's a slow pace, we kind of get front runners. We had some very fast paces recently, faster pace than average. And then I got it sorted by the pace number. These are the time force pace figures, which I think are the best pace figures out there. Then I've got it sorted by the leader at the half the last few years. Then the fast paces this year on the trail, the fastest paces were the Arkansas Derby, the Louisiana Derby, and the Rebel. And what all those races have in common is they were all won by closers. And then when we had a slow pace in the Tampa Bay Derby, we had a wire-to-wire winner in Owen Almighty. Slow pace in the American Pharoah, we had a wire-to-wire winner in Citizen Bull. San Felipe, we had a slow pace, and we had a wire-to-wire winner, or coming off the pace, Journalism. And that's why that was a really good race from Journalism, because normally horses don't come from off the pace to win a slow pace race. So that's why a lot of people like Journalism, the fact that he was able to close into a slow pace race. Thanks a lot for watching, Shelly, and the support. Charles says a lot of front speed in this field race shapes up to be a brisk pace without. Rodriguez, I think, is going to have the lead, but Citizen Bull with the blinkers, those two may get in a duel. I don't think East Avenue is going to be sent in this race like he was sent the last time, but it's possible. And then I've got the pace figures by circuit if you want to kind of analyze the Arkansas, the Louisiana circuit, the Florida circuit, and the California circuit. Then here's the Kentucky Derby history, Brisnet fast pace, slow pace, and then what type of running style won the race. And then I did note which horses have blinkers. Built was actually scratched. I'll delete that. Citizen Bull actually is going to keep the blinkers off, but they did announce that Flying Mohawk is going to race without the blinkers off. He's worn them the last 5 times. And then here's your E8 horses, Citizen Bull and Neokos. Then I've got a prep history. This shows you the Kentucky Derby prep race, and then the number of Kentucky Derby winners that have ran in that race, not the number of times. So this tells me 25 horses that have ran in the Florida Derby have won the Kentucky Derby. 23 horses that have ran in the Bluegrass race have won the Kentucky Derby. Now, remember, the Florida Derby and Bluegrass have been around for a while. And then it's more important for the 3-year-old races and not the 2-year-old races, just because those horses tend to get hurt a little bit more. And then Santa Anita Derby, Fountain of Youth, San Felipe, all in recent years. A lot of that is the Bob Baffert influence with his 6 Kentucky Derby wins. And then, the LaSalle Futurity has been an important prep. Journalism won that. Now it's the Los Alamitos. Before that, it was the Hollywood Futurity. Then I've got the Rand Sire line. Now, this one's a little bit more interesting. The Rand Sire line is called the Raisin Native, and 17 winners in the last 29 years have been on the Raisin Native Sire line. These are some runners this year with the Raisin Native Sire line. Now, these are all of the winners that had ran in them. Mage, Rich Strike, Country House, Super Saver, Mind That Bird. A lot of these horses had ran, and they were all long shots. So that's when this theory really became in vogue. But the problem is now Raisin Native is getting really far back in the pedigree, and you've got to start going 7, 8 generations back to find these horses that have some Raisin Native. I did list it in there because, again, I think it's another factor to narrow down some contenders. And some people will look at this and say, well, journalism has got ran, and then he's a final fractions qualifier. He's got a low dosage. You probably could make a handicapping model and do kind of a point system, which I may do next year to kind of just start to develop a morning line from some of this data. But I did include it in the spreadsheet because for a lot of people, they like to know that Raisin Native. Then you get the buyer history. This is the winning buyer speed figure from 2024 all the way back to 2012. If you notice, we used to have buyers of 104, 105, 103. The last 4 years, we're barely breaking that 100 mark. 105, 102, 101. Mage went a little bit faster and then slower last year with Mystic Dan, the winning Brisnet number, and then the winning Raisin number. Mystic Dan was kind of slow on all 3 scales last year. Mage was about average, and then Rich Strike was slow on the Raisin scale, mainly because he saved a lot of ground and he had kind of a rail trip. And then the fastest buyer, we have the horse that won the Derby with the fastest buyer was the last time it was done was 2018 with Justify. So that's why you need more information than just the fastest buyer. And that's why I like to look at the final fractions, the pace analysis, the strike system. And a lot of people like to look at trip notes and trip handicapping. Then I've got a dosage history. This shows the qualifiers this year and the non-qualifiers. And then every year from 1990 all the way to 2024, what the winning dosage was. But again, this has got about another 75 to 80% hit rate. Strike the gold at a high dosage, real quiet, charismatic. But again, if you notice, a lot of these horses with the higher dosages, they were more favorites anyways. American Pharaoh was a favorite. Nyquist was a favorite. Always Dreaming was a favorite. The long shots were the high prices. So that's why this year, if you don't like Citizen Bull and you don't like Neoquos and Luxor Cafe, this may help you scope out a favorite. Uncle Bob likes the horse side by American Pharaoh. Yes, a slow pace in the UAE Derby, 10-year history, a Triple Crown of American Pharaoh. Let's see. Thunder Gulch won the Derby in 95. He finished 5th in the Florida Derby that year. Yes, the coach had him at 25 to 1. Gary Stevens rode Thunder Gulch. Yeah, a lot of times back then, Dave, the Florida Derby wasn't the final prep. They would go from the Florida Derby to either the Bluegrass or the Wood. So that's why that Florida Derby doesn't have as many winners, because now it's a final prep. And before it used to be a prep for the Wood or the Bluegrass, which was 3 weeks out. So that historical chart is getting a little less relevant as we go along. So that's the last page. Again, you can hit the home button on any of these to go back to the home page. And then if you have any questions over the next few days, this is another thing in Google Sheets. If you click on this little bar here, you can also pick any page. So if you want to see pace analysis, if you want to see the Ran Sire line, if you want to look for the John White 8 factors, you can see all of the factors for the John White. And so there's that. And then I did put a page for questions, or you can email me as well. I will be updating this sheet, put my email address on the home page. So again, this is really just to help people handicap the Derby, watch along on Saturday. If you have any other information that you'd like to be included, leave that in the comments. The spreadsheet is in the link. I do plan on expanding this next year and adding more historical data if I get a few donations this year, and then have it as a free spreadsheet via donations. if possible. The coach will win the Kentucky Derby this year. That says Robert. It's been raining all week in Louisville. One thing is, I will do an updated pedigree sheet on Saturday. If we do get rain Saturday morning and it looks like we're going to have a sloppy track, I will add the Tomlinson numbers. I will do a video on horses that have won in the slop, but I don't want to do it unless we're going to have a sloppy track. Because remember, there is 90 minutes between the Turf Classic and the Derby, and a lot of times they can really scrape down that track and get it dry if it does stop raining. So keep an eye out for that. And then it could turn to mud. So we got to see what happens. Again, those are the videos. Tomorrow night at 5:30, we will do our handicapping video. We're going to take a look at all of the horses. We'll take your questions. We'll go over your comments, kind of see who you like, and we'll handicap starting at 5:30 tomorrow night on the handicapping show. Friday night, I will do a show kind of recapping the Oaks, and we'll go over this sheet, start to look at the early betting on the Kentucky Derby. And tomorrow night, if you have more questions, if you have time to look at this spreadsheet and have some questions tomorrow, we can answer a few of those questions as well. But I wanted to get the spreadsheet out there and get it in everybody's hands so you can kind of take a look at different information. And Ronnie wants to know a long shot. We'll answer that question tomorrow. Maybe some other people have some long shots as well. But the Kentucky Oaks is Friday, Kentucky Derby on Saturday, handicapping show tomorrow night at 5:30. Kentucky Derby prospectus is out. Let me know what you think of it in the comments. And remember, people have opinions, horses have the facts. And remember, Alex is going to review the data and start handicapping tomorrow. Good. So remember, you still got to get a good trip. You still got to be training well. You still got to work out well. But let's have a good Derby and let's get some information out there for Saturday. See you tomorrow night at 5:30.